Yes.
Okay.
The meeting recording has just started. And I'm just going to remind everyone on the phone to please mute yourself when you're not talking. Otherwise, there's a lot of echo.
Okay, so is Shauna going to come on, Jen, or what?
I'm here.
Conference room.
I'm in the conference room, Dave.
Oh, there you are, way down at the end. Okay.
Down at the end.
I see. Okay, so Shauna's put together a proposal that she wants to present to the board, at least for discussion purposes at this point. I think everybody got a copy of her message of yesterday, I hope, and has had a chance to look at it. Shauna, do you want to go talk about it?
Yep. So following our last work session, I went ahead and took the notes that Mark had put together, Laura had, and what I had from listening to what the board members shared. I also included things, Dave and I had a conversation about sort of challenging what we had proposed before, meaning we put in a higher megawatt number. We heard some discussion and concern about going ahead and basing it upon megawatt, but I did do some research. There is annual reporting that has to be done by any of the solar projects to NYSERDA. I'm comfortable in that we can do it based upon megawatt. So the basic points that I'm going for is 7,500 per megawatt and increase it by 2% annually. If there's base rent, they would go ahead and that would still be paid. One of the clauses I did include was I do want to know, and whatever the agreement is with the landowner, what is the solar company proposing in regards to they might be laying all taxes and such on the landowner. I want to be sure that that's disclosed and we understand it, because I also don't want to put an undue burden on that landowner because they might not have been aware what else was going on the pilot side.
Can I interrupt on that?
Yep.
Is that our responsibility, you think, to, I understand you wanting to see it, but is it our responsibility, the IDA, to get involved between the landowner and the developer, Sean?
We can do that, Ferris. Wait, you mean the responsibility of asking who's paying the taxes? I can't hear you now. I'm sorry, you're muted.
That would be all right with me to find that information out. But you said that like we would enforce the deal between the landowner and the developer. I'm not sure that's our responsibility.
I wouldn't be enforcing it. I think we just need to know up front that if somehow they're dealing with somebody who might not, like, I don't want to get involved in people's negotiations, but I also want to be cautious that they're not putting a clause in this deal and you have some landowner who thinks they hit the payload and then are challenged with, you know, you're still making me pay the taxes and you put a clause in there that I have to pay this pilot too. I want this pilot to go on the solar developer. So that was my thought process on that. I did it as a 15-year term. I did some deviations below in the message I sent you that I would say I'd like the board to consider if we're looking for deviation, such as buying, you know, US made panels, or, you know, it's a brownfield. Certain things, if there's a need and a good legitimate case can be made that they need more than 15 years. That gives you the discretion of handling that. Let me go back to, we get this report that goes to NYSERDA. If we see that they're supposed to only do 5 megawatts and they do 6, we do an adjustment and they have to pay the differential to the taxing jurisdictions. I did run this past the Whitesboro School District and the comment back was they'd love to see some new generation of business and taxes. That's just a side note because we were asked to do that. let's see. Then the other thing, and I got this from talking not to Wayland, but to another developer. Yep.
When you say the application reads 5 megawatt, but they end up with 6, you're saying it becomes more, oh, for a better word, fruitful or productive, and it produces more. Is that what you're saying, or do they
Yeah,
change?
so the bill would go out beginning of the year for 5 megawatts the first year. And we see that they now really produce 6. We would send out an additional bill for that additional megawatt to be then distributed pro rata to the taxing jurisdictions.
That's based on the assumption that we're going to be the policing agent or the bookkeeper for this?
What we're going to get is we're going to get their annual report that they have to issue to NYSERDA that says at the end of the year, this is what this solar farm or clean energy facility produced. If the application said 5 and it was 6, we just generate a new bill. I'm comfortable doing that, Ferris. We do that now for the pilot TIFs. And what's easier here is that I'm working off of one report versus waiting for all the taxing jurisdictions to give me their rates and stuff. So I'm okay with that. And we are going to charge, rather than the normal $750 for their fee, their annual fee, it would be $2,000 for the processing. So when I talked to one of another solar developer who's looking at another location, and I think I told you this, she shared that she started talking to the taxing jurisdiction in which they're going to be located, basically the lowest level. So if it's a city, it's a city. If it's a town, it's a town. If it's a village, it's the village, for a host payment of 5% of the taxes. We would collect that at the same time we collect the fee, the pilot fee, and it would be distributed to the taxing jurisdictions. If the feeling is that should be totally separate, I'm fine for that. But I think what that does is it just gives some additional benefit to those being most disturbed.
I don't understand that. If why do the extra 5%? Why not just make the tax higher? It's simpler, and then you're not doubling up.
If I change the pro rata, Mike, I need to go ahead and get a pilot allocation agreement with all the taxing jurisdictions if I'm changing the rates among the taxing jurisdictions.
Yeah, Mike, the problem is that the tax is automatically prorate based upon the current tax rate. So the host payment would be on top of that, and it might very well be, it would be above the amount that the pilot payment would be to the local municipality. So
it just seems like we're making this awful complicated. But my problem is, if we have somebody comes in and says, I'm going to build a factory, and it's going to be worth just as much as that solar array next door, and they're going to build 50 jobs, we're giving them a smaller benefit than we are to this solar project, and they're producing 1 job. So I don't understand.
I think, Mike, you would see it.
Can I finish, Shauna?
Okay, sorry.
I just don't understand why we're driving to such an extreme benefit for the solar. As Ferris pointed out 3 meetings ago, they're doing it because this is lucrative to them. They're just developers. They're probably going to sell it again, as seems to be the case, to somebody else as an investor based on the payment streams. And I just don't see the need to give away the story here. Now, there's a number of these projects that are going forward, and they're going forward without a benefit. So, I mean, there's money to be made here right now, and they're taking advantage of it. And I just don't see, especially post COVID-19, why we would want to give away the kind of benefits we are when these taxing jurisdictions are going to be hurting for it. Even the sales tax, I question whether the sales tax should be a full sales tax at this point in time. Okay, now I'll be quiet.
let me just just comment on Mike's comments. The problem is that when a town has not opted out of the 487 exemption, then the towns and school districts get nothing. And
Right.
so the solar company walks away with all that benefit themselves. So what this does is equalize the process throughout the county so that the towns and villages and school districts in the county at least get a consistent benefit from the solar projects. Because if a town is opted out of this and then assesses projects at full shot, they just won't go. They'll just go to the next town that hasn't opted out of it. So I think
I didn't say we shouldn't do it. I just said, why are we making the benefit so big?
I don't think, so if you do the calculation.
Go ahead,
Sorry,
Sean.
go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Shauna.
I don't think the calculation is so big. I mean, if you look, Mike, you would ask me later to do a calculation on what 7,500 would be per megawatt with Wayland. We did that and sent it back. It was lower than what we had looked at before. And I think it does go back to part of Dave's point of the opting in, not opting out, opting in, opting out. I think a lot of the taxing jurisdictions just don't have the sophistication. They're not going to have the staff to do any of this. I think it's just going to get so bad for these jurisdictions with cuts and not having the funds that I think if we get a set policy, I think it just helps. This is not going to be a huge burden on us to do it the way we're structuring it. We're going in knowing what it is. Where we would have the problem is if we start carving it up each and every solar project, that would be my fear and deviating. I like if we can have the standard and do it.
So I'm not arguing about doing it. I'm not arguing about protect the towns that opt out. Again, my question is, why are we giving a benefit bigger than an industrial benefit to a solar array which produces one job and may only marginally help people in the county, even utility wise, because it can be sold anywhere inside National Grid's grid. So, standardize, make it clear and easy for the towns. Okay, but why are we doing the benefit so big?
Well, so Mike, what would you suggest, a higher megawatt pilot?
No, I would suggest what we talked about last time is just put them on a commercial pilot. Don't create a new policy for them. Say that solar fits into our commercial public program and put them on that.
Yeah, the problem is that these assessors are putting assessments on even where they're exempt, at essentially what the cost is to install the solar project. So let's say it costs $10 million. They're putting on the equalization rate equivalent of a $10 million assessment on the property. And so you have no control over what these things are really valued at. I mean, I don't know that you and I would pay a lot of money for the actual solar project itself because it got subsidized by 50% of its cost.
But Dave, the thing is, if I built a new factory, I got to face the assessor and he's going to look at what I put in for a building permit, how much it costs to build it, not necessarily what it's worth on resale. That's what the courts are there for. They can grieve the assessment and fight. I don't think that's our job here. We're going to say that we've set up a system. It's really easy to follow. We already have all the paperwork done for it, commercial. And, again, we're talking about one job here, two jobs.
Yeah, I don't think jobs are the key to this. I think the key is that if you really want to get down to it, whether we like him or not, this is the government's sort of edict that the state needs to go green, and therefore the IDA should be involved in doing it and should be doing it in a way that fosters these things to be placed, not sent somewhere else.
Well, my answer to that, Dave, is I wasn't appointed by the governor. I don't work for the governor. I work for the county, so.
I agree. I agree with you on that.
So my conversation with the county is they are good with us proceeding with this.
Yeah, but the thing is, if you said to the county that a project like Whaling's going to go forward, and pay more taxes to the Holland Patton School District, more to the town of Trenton, and more to the county, is that a bad thing? I don't think anybody in the county is going to say no.
No, and I think that what I got from the school district and what we saw from Joe Smith was they do appreciate us getting involved in managing the structure, so doing something, but they also appreciate us collecting on this, which I have no issue. I talked to Dave about that, because if it becomes a chase job of I can't get the payment, within 30 days, I'm going to come back to you and say, take it off.
Okay, again, you're answering questions I'm not asking, Sean. I'm not asking.
I get that, Mike.
Yeah, okay.
I think looking at all the NYSERDA material, I think, we shared last meeting that chart where it goes from the green to the red, where they're trying to show the cost prohibitiveness. The 7,500 is in the red. So it's not favorable. And I think the commercial pilot would not be either. I think people would determine not doing these projects if they have to pay a higher fee.
Shauna, excuse me. We saw the financials on the last project that we were talking about doing. I'm with Mike on this benefit being too rich. I think we got to scale it back. We're going through some very difficult times, and I know the elected officials, sorry, Jackie, you excluded, are saying everything they can. They want these things done and done and done, but somebody has to pay for it. And I think we just owe it to the county to make this benefit less.
Well,
So
These projects work on their own. This project, if this group decides not to do this project that we looked at a few weeks ago, let them go somewhere else. But based on those financials, I find it hard to believe, Ferris brought this up a few times, that they're not going to do this project.
Well, the other problem, Steve and Mike, is that there are towns that have not opted out of 487. What happens is these solar companies come in and send just an ordinary letter to the town telling them they're going to put a solar project in. The town and the solar company have to enter into a pilot with the town within 60 days. If they can't reach agreement, then the project's totally exempt from taxes. So what you've got is potentially, if a town doesn't know what they're doing, that the whole project goes up with no contribution to anybody.
Dave, again, we're not saying at all not to do this. We're saying why, and then we send it, after we get this done, we send a letter out to all the towns telling them we've done it, and they can collect taxes on it.
So
What solar companies will do is they'll play the game. They'll send the notice to the town, and if the town doesn't respond or doesn't do it, and they need the pilot, then they'll come after the IDA for the pilot. So
what's this going to change if we do the benefit different? They're going to try it maybe anyways to get away with it, and if they succeed, they'll end up with no taxes. If they don't succeed, it'll come back to us, because they're going to want the pilot that we're proposing over just paying a full tax anyways.
Well, we're also competing with other counties, and they're going, 20-year pilots all over the ballpark. Some of them on $3,000 a megawatt, some of them on $12,000 a megawatt. I think my feeling is we should have a policy. I don't think the commercial policy fits. Not only does it not fit with term, because these things are authorized 15-year tax exemption, so we're not even in that ball game. I think if we have a policy that's based upon the commercial, it needs to be different as far as a transition from 1/3, 2/3, spreading out maybe 15 or 20 years, and in that way be somewhat consistent with our industrial policy, although not totally, because these projects are essentially non-job producing. They're just generating jobs, so they're going to need to be there for 15 to 20 years.
I'll just throw out, if we increase the megawatt or the charge per megawatt to 10,000, if that's the more comfortable way, we get pretty close to what overall for 15 years the industrial pilot brings us.
I didn't hear that, Mary Faye.
I said if we increase the amount per megawatt to 10,000, we get close to what not totally to where the industrial pilot brings us, but closer, like 553 versus 415, and it's weighted more toward the earlier years
Right.
than the industrial pilot. Just
And the
for-
other thing we can do too, to the sales tax issue, and Linda, you need to weigh in for me. We don't have to do the full 8.75. I mean, we could do it up to a certain dollar value, and then they don't get any more benefit above it. Or we can just, Linda, can we just collect local, make them do local and not state tax? Sales tax?
I think you can make I would rather cap it, Shauna. I think that's the safer way to go, just so you can limit the benefit that way.
What was that, Linda?
I would rather put a cap on it than divvy up different parts of it. I would rather just cap the benefit.
I still didn't understand what you were saying.
She's saying, so if they need $10 million of sales tax, you say we're only going to issue up to 5 million, for
Right.
example.
Dave, can you hear me?
So is that different? Yeah, you're kind of fuzzy, but is that, could you still cut the percentage and keep the same amount?
Yes.
So if we cut the percentage down, do you have to cut out the county or cut out the state, or can you do it on a pro rata basis?
I think it's safest to do it on a pro rata basis.
So I don't know if anybody knows this.
I'm sorry.
There's a question I have. The sales tax, say they pay X 100,000 in sales tax. Does that become part of the project cost that they get a 50% tax credit on anyway? I'm just wondering.
Say, Mary Faith, I'm sorry, can you say that question again?
I was wondering if we're looking at exempting them from sales tax, but any sales tax they pay, I'm wondering if that's part of the 50% tax credit they get on the project cost anyway. I don't know that. I mean,
I don't think so, because I think this is done as an investment tax.
I know, but I think
They get a credit on the total cost.
yeah, I think that's it. The total cost, which probably includes whatever associated taxes are with that cost.
On the sales tax, do we know what part of the project is exempt automatically? Because like manufacturing equipment is exempt, or are the panels sales tax applies or not? Do we know that?
I think
I
it all
think they
is.
would be
Yeah.
exempt
Yeah.
as production equipment. I mean, is the equivalent of production equipment.
Do you think the panel's exempt, Linda?
I think they are, Phyllis. I would definitely want to check that, though. I think they are.
All right, I'd like to see
No.
that. I'd like to know that answer.
I thought the way he explained it the last time was that a lot of the materials that go into the actual construction, like of the bases and the things they put in the ground, were all taxable. But the
Panels,
actual
The
Panels
most
might be
expensive part of the
taxable.
project is the panel, so is it not, Mark?
I think so, yeah.
And then I'd like to know that answer for
Well,
sure.
the thing is, Ferris, you can tell,
I'll get that,
Ferris,
Ferris.
you can tell the answer somewhat. This is a $10 million project Whaling was talking about, wasn't it? There's only $168,000 in sales tax according to Shauna, so that's essentially 2 million of it's sales taxable and 8 million isn't.
Yeah.
My understanding, it's the site work and the structure that holds.
Okay, and do we know if the town got involved in the pilot and not us? Would they be, they're not legally able to exempt sales tax, are they?
No,
So
No,
they
they
could
would just
not,
be able to do the pilot.
the pilot.
They also couldn't exempt mortgage tax if there was going to be a mortgage.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
I don't
I
know.
want you-
I
I just
don't
want
know
to
that
add,
I don't think these things carry a mortgage. They may be, I think it's a leasehold mortgage that they get. It's not a ground mortgage, so I don't know whether I don't know how the mortgage tax applies to those.
so the other, let me just finish if that's okay with you. The other thing that we talked about last meeting and I heard, and I'm not quite sure, the cost. We probably can ask somebody to weigh in on it who is in the construction business. A decommissioning bond, or we create an escrow account and maybe there's an additional fee that just gets set up. I don't know if we can hold, I know the IDA can't hold an escrow account.
Why can't we?
So, what?
Why can't
My
we do it?
understanding, if I collect a fee from a company, I need to turn it over. I gotta be sure, does that just apply? And I have a period of time in which I have to hand the money over, as the recipient of pilot. We just need to be sure that it's set up separately, and maybe we just require them to do it as a bond, not as an escrow. For,
Well, I mean, we got a pilot, I mean, we got an escrow on the farmer property up in next to SUNY, don't we?
Yeah, I think so.
It's $500,000 for the wetlands,
it's
aren't we
not-
holding?
Right, but there was an agreement set up. It wasn't as a pilot.
Well, I don't think if you do a decommissioning payment, it ought to be a separate contract that's outside the
Yes.
pilot.
I agree with Mike entirely. This needs, that's a separate one. It's gonna go on for whatever the time period, could go up to 30 or 35 years. And I think they can buy from a bonding company a fixed initial payment, one-shot payment for a bond that will cover, hopefully the insurance company will be around 30 years from now, but will cover the decommissioning cost and the removal cost of the solar panels. And so it may be that you can incorporate that right into whatever approvals we would give for the solar project, that they have to come up with a estimate of cost of decommissioning and a bond to support the removal.
Yeah, I mean, I want to think that through, Dave, because I want to be sure 30 years from now that, that insurance companies there, or that money had been continued to be paid. If, say, our pilot, we need to be sure we collect enough money while we're still in that position to collect enough to keep this funded for decommissioning.
Well, I think we ought to require a bond. I don't think holding money makes sense. We don't know what those costs are going to be 25 years from now. I think we require them to get a bond to support the total removal and decommissioning as part of the deal. And if they can't do that, they have to come to us to why they can't. So that way we don't get involved in the cost of removal. We don't get in the cost of the decommissioning. It's going to be supported by a bonding company. Either that, if the company can't do it, the bonding company will have to hire somebody to do it. That's my feeling.
Dave, Whaling's application proposed a bond.
I can't remember.
It did, yeah, he provided all that information.
So
Yeah, Ferris, you're unmuted. You got to unmute, Ferris.
Is all this really what we want to get involved in? I mean, this seems very complicated. For 15 years, we're going to be involved in policing a bond. We're going to get involved in, isn't it the town's responsibility and the local governmental agency to make sure that they get this project removed off that property when it's over? I'm not sure this is the IDA's responsibility, is it? And then do we want to tie up our staff for $2,000 a year going through collecting money, holding money, making payments? Is this something we really want to do? That's my question to the rest of the board.
If we do it now with some of these pilot payments that are paid to us, like for the New Hartford school system, then we don't get any money for it. We just do it. So go ahead, Sean.
I'm reading.
So the other thing, I guess, I know that the feeling is, we don't care what they say on the part of some, but I think we've gotten a message from the state to the IDAs, please get involved in this. And to have the state coming and asking us to do something when you have people in the state trying to get rid of IDAs, I think it helps. It just helps move us along in a better light. Ferris, I'm comfortable from a staff perspective doing the collection on this. The first one's going to be unique because we just need to come up with the format and everything. And, on the decommissioning, I'm not a specialist in saying how do you collect the money or the structure. Maybe we need to do just a little research of, just being sure they get a bond, and we have a system that tracks if insurance gets dropped. And we just put this right into that. I mean, we can lay that burden on the taxing jurisdictions, but I know when you're dealing with some of these smaller municipalities, it's only gonna be on the radar long enough for the current administration. And that's if they can even give it the attention that it needs. One thing, and Mark Levitt emailed me, solar panels and installation are exempt from sales and use tax in New York State. So it goes back to, they were only asking for sales tax exemption on a very small amount.
Thank you, Mark.
So, I mean, I kind of like Mary Faith's comment about increasing the annual payment per megawatt. And, you know, considering what we've been talking about today, if we're going to do it, we might as well get closer to what, you know, what might be kind of what we would do for an industrial energy plant or a windmill or something like that. So we may be getting some of those at some point. I know up in Lewis County, they've got another expansion of their windmills, which I think are done under their IDA. So I think, you know, I think that Mary Faith makes a good suggestion. It's kind of a compromise. And I think there are a couple of IDAs that are more than that. Sean, aren't there?
There's somebody who's up to 12.
Okay.
And some that are lower, but what we're hearing from the ones that are lower, like in the $3,000 range, they're increasing theirs.
So, Mike, if we went to $10,000 a megawatt, that gets us closer to a figure that is other than based upon cost or assessment. You got to unmute, Mike. You got to unmute. Yeah.
Actually, some people probably prefer I talk with it muted, but that's okay. So
Make these minutes a lot easier, Mike.
you could just sweat. He kept nodding his head. But what I would think would make the real difference is make it a 10-year, which industrial and commercial gets 10 years. They're going to price it into what they're getting. The cost of energy is going to go up. They'll be making more money per megawatt. And on the other side, you could limit the sales tax to $2,000 per megawatt. So on a 3.5 megawatt, they'd get $70,000 in sales tax benefit, pay the sales tax above that, get a 10-year benefit on a pilot with a $10,000 per megawatt charge. It would put them pretty close to the industrial for those 10 years and would still be a lot better than the commercial. So, you know, I think that would be a more reasonable place to start. And I think it would pump some money right away into the county and the sales tax, and also reduce this benefit for an extended period of time. Plus, we can measure this. If it turns out that we're the only county that's not getting any solar, the sun's going to be there next year, and we can back off. But if we give away a 15-year benefit, we're stuck. We can't bring it back to 10 then.
Well, let me ask this question, Sean. Have you talked to NYSERDA at all? Because NYSERDA now has oversight over these things. Citing ones, they actually can override. I think they can even override us.
So what NYSERDA likes the 0%. So
0% what?
The zero pilot. And that's why I think that's important that we get involved.
You're saying NYSERDA wants us to give a total exemption to the?
No, if NYSERDA steps in, my feeling is they will push for the zero full tax exemption.
Well, they have the ability to do that if they find that the town's position on their pilots are unreasonable, and I think they would do the same with us. We have to be careful that the state law gives the 15-year exemption. That's where the 15-year comes from.
Right.
Again, when you say unreasonable, that's a big word in the court of law.
Understand, Ferris, that NYSERDA people are appointed by the governor. Understand that.
Yeah, but the thing, the solar cells themselves are getting more efficient. all right. So the thing is, actually, you're better off waiting a couple of years and probably you'll make more money out of it. So, I mean, it's not like if we lose this, that somebody's not going to do it next year. Again, we can always make the benefit bigger. We can't make it smaller on the ones we've already done. And
I don't know how long they'll wait, Mike, and it's just due to the fact because they know they want to take advantage of the benefits coming out of the state now. And
Sean, if the state is, and I also question whether post COVID-19, the state's going to be giving money away the way it is right now. So if they want to, if the state wants it to go forward, they can extend the benefit. You know, that 20% essentially give back from NYSERDA. I just don't. I see where there's a downside to us to giving too much up front and not really a downside at all to waiting until it settles out a little more. And again, I think the state may change their tune a little bit about giving away sales tax down the road here. I mean, the mayor, look at the announcement she just made about having to, you know, they let all the part-time employees go. They're cutting back on spending. I think they're all going to be facing this. So I'd be much more in favor of a 10-year benefit, a $10,000 megawatt, and limit the sales tax to $2,000 a megawatt.
Well, I think my gut feeling after reading all this is that NYSERDA would step in on that. I would say if we went 10 years, you need to transition down to a 15-year on a prorata and an annual basis, prorated down up to full assessment at 15 years. Would be my suggestion. I think you're going to run into trouble if you don't get a 15-year exemption. I know that these solar companies need to have that in order to be able to market these things, and I don't represent him. I just read all this stuff about them because there's just a lot of activity going on in the area, or the people are proposing. I just got a call yesterday from a lawyer in Albany wanting to know what the situation is in Oneida County with solar, and I had to tell him I can't talk about that. So I think
okay. So let me throw out another option. You do 10 years at 10,000, and Dave, if you feel comfortable of an additional 5 years, do it at 12,000.
Run that by
per megawatt. Do 10 years at 10,000 a megawatt. Then prorate it down from not years 11 through 15 at 12,000.
We're talking, I haven't done the computation, but anything that would generate more money to the taxing jurisdictions in years 11 through 15, I think would comply with what Mike's talking about.
Would you tell me Wayland's 3.2?
What about
They
instead
said
of
in the
that,
application,
doing away
yeah.
with the sales tax exemption altogether?
It got cut off, Mary Faith, in the beginning.
I said, what about instead of that, just doing away with the sales tax exemption altogether? That would give some money to the communities right up front. I don't know how much we're talking about.
Yeah, well, the sales tax money would go essentially just to the county and the state. State gets half of it and the county gets half of it. And a lot of the towns get some of it on a throw out from the county, but I think in light of what's happened with the sales tax revenue at the county level, I'm not sure the towns are going to get what they've gotten in the past.
Mayor, can you hear me? Mayor Izzo?
You got to unmute, Jackie.
Jackie, are you there?
I'm here, Ferris.
Do you know where NYSERDA gets the money from? Is it part of fees they charge that they give out to these projects, or is it out of the state coffers? Do you know?
No, it's part of the state. It's just another agency that they fund. I've been listening to all of this. I've been through several of these projects. My biggest problem with any of this is giving a sales tax benefit to these people. There's several projects, well, probably around the county right now, there's maybe 6 to 8 projects, mostly done by government. Not one of them had a sales tax exemption. These people are in it to make money. These projects to me are lucrative. They're being sold off 2 and 3 times before they're even put up online. So from the taxing standpoint, normally I'm in favor of all of these types of things for development, but on this one, I can't support a sales tax break for them. I don't think they need it, and I don't think that their models are very good. There's usually escalators in there. In fact, the city of Rome, unfortunately, were done before we got here. We are looking at the possibility that we are actually going to pay more for the solar energy than we are going to pay to National Grid in about 2 years. We're just about breaking even. So I think, you need to be, although the governor has put a big emphasis on this, he wants the state to go green. And yeah, I sympathize with Shauna. They want the IDAs to get involved because they understand that if the IDAs get involved, they haven't got to deal with all these taxing jurisdictions. It's going to become a contentious issue because eventually what's going to happen is these energy companies are going to be supplying energy from upstate to downstate. That's really what this is about.
Yeah.
So
Mayor, based upon hearing what you're going through, the county, other jurisdictions, as staff would say, don't do sales tax. I did a quick calculation, Dave. I recommended going year 11 to 12,000. You're better off staying at the 10 with the escalator. At the end of the 15 years, you still have an additional $5,000 versus going to 12 in year 11.
I think the escalator is important in this type of pilot because they are putting escalators into the agreements with whoever they're negotiating with, whoever's going to pay energy, whoever's going to benefit from the energy. Normally, there's an escalator built into those almost every year, and they're usually around 1.5% to 2%. So
I use 2%.
Yep, I think it would behoove you not to do an escalator in there.
Brody from Bonchenick and King suggested that as well. He thought it was safer.
Mayor, could you say that again? You were breaking up a little bit.
I'm sorry. I was saying, Mike, that I think absolutely you should be doing an escalator because they are doing an escalator. Normally, those PPA agreements are looking at anywhere from 1.5% to 2% escalator per year to their customers. So that's really could be a guide for you as far as how you're going to bump up the pilot.
Why don't we just do that? Maybe the compromise is to do this. Why don't we have the $10,000 with a 2% escalator, and let's just move the escalator up in year 11 through 15 to 5%.
And that's a good, and no sales tax exemption.
No sales tax exemption.
Mike, repeat the last part of that, please.
Okay, I said $10,000 per megawatt with a 2% escalator for the first 9 years thereafter. In years 11, 15, the escalator would be 5% per year, and there'd be no sales tax benefit.
Okay, give me a second. I'll tell you what it comes at.
Yeah, I think that makes some sense, Mike. Personally.
Ferris, you had a question as far as how the money NYSERDA, if you look on your National Grid bill, you'll see a systems benefits charge. That's where they get all, you're paying for that every month.
I thought. Thank you, Mark.
Well, I'm glad Ferris is paying for it.
Yeah, we're gonna have National Grid just bill Ferris for this stuff.
Except he's paying Florida Power and Light right now. So.
They're cheap.
I know.
I guess.
Gee, I wonder why.
The other question we could address now, if there's some sense of agreement on that, we can have the staff kind of write that up. But also, should this apply to windmill projects? I don't know that we have any pending, but I have heard rumors of possibility. Does the same formula work for that? Anybody know?
I think
I
we'd
think
probably,
until we-
it'd be helpful if we had somebody who knew something about windmills to come and talk to us about that. Mommy Don Quixote.
Don Quixote.
Chris, do you know anything about windmills?
I'll see if Brody knows about windmills too. Maybe Brody does.
Was that Linda?
Yeah.
Yeah, I said maybe Brody knows about windmills too. I'll check.
Well, you're coming in almost broken up, Linda.
She's gonna
Okay,
ask
I'll
Brody.
check with Brody and see if he knows about windmills. I know they've done some projects, I think up in Lewis County.
Okay. Well, I just thought that if we did a policy that covers energy, it makes a little sense if it sort of meshes with windmills. I think the costs are probably fairly similar, but I don't know. I know that they're both in their Madison County and they're in Lewis County. I don't know that we have any in Oneida County yet.
We're going to call you Don Quixote from now on, Dave.
I have not heard an interest in any, and I know maybe about 10 years ago, we had some conversation. The county had done an assessment of where windmills should be. There were maybe 1 or 2 spots in Oneida County, but they weren't high on the list. I did the calculation based upon going to the 5%. What it changes is approximately 20, it adds an additional $22,000 to the whole calculation.
Okay.
Okay?
Why don't you just redo Whaling and let us see
I
it?
did.
No, I
I
mean,
did.
send it out to us. The only thing is, I don't know, in the sample you sent yesterday for Whaling, it started at $24,000. I don't know where you got that because
I
three and a half times
just-
7,500 is more than that.
Oh, I took 3.2 times 7,500.
Okay, well, their application said 3.5.
Okay.
I mean, it's not a big difference, but it's.
Yeah,
We must be getting close because I'm beginning to sense a reasonable compromise, even though I think it's still too high and everybody else thinks it's probably too low, so it must be close.
Well, I'd be interested to see how that works with the Whaling project.
I like the no sales tax.
It says
You want to know what,
3.2.
Mike?
So I said I like the no sales tax.
Yeah.
Oh, no sales tax. I thought you wanted to know about sales tax.
Because it's simple and straightforward.
The compromise might be if we get into that on the sales tax that if we can, and I don't know if Linda can find this out, if we could just exempt out no state sales tax and just have county sales tax and let the state suffer the sales tax loss.
None.
Dave, I think we can. I just want to confirm that. So you would then.
Shauna, it is 3.2.
Okay, that's how we
Yeah.
do that.
I couldn't hear any of that, Linda.
I don't know why my phone is so bad here. I'm going to check. So the compromise would be to have the county's sales tax paid, but no state.
Well, not a compromise, just to know whether that could be done.
Whether, yeah, I will check that. I think it can, but I will check it and let you know right away.
Right now, the county needs sales tax money.
Right. Well, so does the state.
Okay. So let's see where we are. I mean, it's getting close to what we anticipated ending this, but I guess, Shauna, you can write up a summary of this so that we can see it in our next meeting. I talked to Shauna yesterday about the possibility of doing an in-person meeting at the next time. And so how do you all feel about that?
So I'm comfortable that we can
Ferris, you're
accommodate.
muted. Yeah. Ferris is talking. He's muted.
Oh, go ahead.
No fair.
You're muted again. Paris, stop.
You're
Paris,
unmute.
stop.
Unmute.
Unmute yourself.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, go.
As long as everybody wears a mask, I'm not attending any meeting at my age where everybody's not wearing a mask.
Well, I asked Shauna whether we could separate 6 feet.
You can't.
I think we
We
can
certainly
if we
could.
just have board members. So I
I still
think.
want
what we-
everybody, I still will not attend a meeting. I'll have to attend electronically. I'm 75 years old, folks.
No, I think the masks are a good idea. The masks are a good idea.
Okay.
I'm going to be wearing a mask for a long time to come. I will not attend a meeting without masks.
More than
on
10
everybody.
people, though.
What, John?
What's
Can't
wrong
have
with
more
this
than 10
format?
people.
Jackie wants to chime in here.
Yeah, Dave, I can tell you from the control group's perspective on the reopening, public meetings are not in the mix right now. You have the governor's executive order that's sitting below this, where Jen, I think, just brought it up. You have to have 10 or less. You have to have the social distancing. This is a pain in the neck, but I think this is going to be the future throughout the summer, at least.
Okay. Well,
We're not even talking about going to public meetings with the council, the POE, the planning or the zoning boards. It's just not feasible right now.
well, obviously, if the guidance is going to come from the state on that particular issue, then we obviously can't do it. I mean, so that's pretty obvious.
If you watch the events of last week, all the guidance is coming from the state on every issue.
Well, I hope it goes away sometime. It's just too much for me. And Ferris talks about being 75, but I'm 77 and I can't take all this stuff either. So
77.
Who is?
So,
Dave.
Dave,
77.
instead of having Shauna do notes, why don't you just take the proposed policy and rewrite it and change it to what we talked about today?
okay. Okay, Shauna?
Yep. Now, let's just, if anybody have any other issues with some of the deviation clauses I put in there, any of that, are you good with leaving that there for consideration?
Why don't you send it out and then we can pick on the particular words, but at least we'll have the theory.
Okay.
I personally am in favor of a bond on decommissioning. So I would suggest that be at least a primary part.
I don't want to put the burden on him, but Steve, can you see if a bond like that exists?
Okay. Yeah, they do, but they'll be very hard to get.
You're getting them
The
now.
underwriting is gonna be difficult on those.
Well, we ought to have some idea what it is before we ask them to do it.
These are expensive bonds, but
I was
they,
gonna say, that's the other thing too, they're very expensive. But, I mean, if, you know,
well, we could clearly ask Wayland if they're getting a bond to decommission. And
I
if
just
so, where?
sent Dave, I sent the information that they included with their application with regards to the decommissioning out. I sent it in an email to everyone.
Was
Look,
there a
I'm
bond
starting
in it?
on page, yes, if you look, I just sent an email to everyone with their plan for decommissioning.
I know, but was there any detail on a bond?
On page 4, it went into them providing a bond, and if you look at it, it went into, I didn't read the whole thing, but it does propose a bond.
Yeah, I know, but I think in our policy, we need more detail than just proposing a bond. We would need an estimate of the cost of decommissioning based today and a bonding company that guarantees that in 35 years, they'll be able to do it. That's what a bond is for. But anyway, Shauna, can you kind of check that out?
Yeah. The other thing too is to get a lot of what we heard today, answers in these applications, we'll probably modify our application to add an extra page for solar.
Oh, sure. Dave, or Shauna, what's the concern with decommissioning? I mean, a nuclear power plant, yeah, it's a big problem. Even a probably a natural gas plant, it's a norm state. Taking these apart, I wouldn't think would be that monstrous. You just need a ratchet wrench and a lot of time.
The issue
I
is
think
not
it's
taking them
concrete.
apart. The issue is the 6 or the 4-foot concrete ballasts in the ground that are placed on farmland, that when these things are removed, the farmland's almost unusable. So the decommissioning has to include removal of all the concrete supporting structures down to 4 feet, which is the biggest part of the cost of decommissioning.
Okay.
Dave, I'm just looking at this plan Whaling's provided. It's pretty detailed.
I don't have it in front of me, Mark. Did you said you need it, emailed it to us?
Yes.
All right, I'll look for it.
So where did we leave the sales tax? Because I'd still be in favor of no sales tax exemption.
Where we're at.
Okay,
No
We're at-
sales tax.
We said that.
thank you.
Yeah, then we're gonna try to find out if we can give the county its sales tax, and not have the state as a compromise. Find out if it can be done.
Just
Yeah.
a word from
I've
Albany.
Yeah, I've already, I've got feelers out for that. I should have an answer on that, a definitive answer momentarily.
Okay, just a word from Albany, the state senate. My understanding is from my sources that several people are looking at them buying offshore these products and getting that money from NYSERDA. They evidently weren't aware of it.
Buying what? Buying what, Ferris?
Buying the panels offshore and getting all that money, like in one of the projects, you know how much money they're getting. I don't want to talk about it, but you know how much money they're getting for buying product offshore and not buying domestic. So someone's looking at it right now in the state senate.
To
I
make
suspect
that a
the state will look
requirement.
at it. I suspect the state will want to know that issue. NYSERDA will. NYSERDA is the one that's going to be in charge of all this for the state, so they're the ones that are going to dictate how these things are going to get cited and really supplied.
Well, maybe our answer could be that we're not going to give a county sales tax exemption, and we'll give a state sales tax exemption if you buy the units domestically. But you pay the state sales tax also if you don't buy them domestically. Maybe we
That's a
can
good
look at that.
idea, I think. Good idea.
Okay,
Donna?
I'm gonna modify.
Laura
what I sent
Roberto
you
has
yesterday
left
to
the
include
meeting.
These thoughts, come back if I missed something. I'm also gonna send out a revised spreadsheet, like the one you got yesterday, with the 10,000 plus escalator years 11 through 15 at 5%.
2% for the first 10 years.
It's
Yeah,
escalating
2%
every
for years
year up
1
to the
through
10 at 2%. Donna,
Pardon me?
you're escalating, beginning with the second year at 2%.
Yes, I have that.
Anything else? Okay, well, it looks like we're
Our
gonna
next
be,
meeting,
we're gonna be on the computer at the next meeting, looks like, so.
when is our next meeting?
It's is it, what is
The 19th.
19th? Yeah, okay.
19th, okay.
Sean, have you got much in the way of applications for the 19th?
I have an application from Edge for the exemption of a power line. But other than that, I did hear that I was going to see some solar applications.
Okay.
And we'll put Wayland back on if that's okay with everybody.
Do we have any information from,
Let's wait. We got to get the policy in place.
right, but do we have
Well,
any information?
If you're, Ferris, I'm sorry, give me 1 sec. Linda, answer me this. I think we can do this. It would be a deviation, correct, until we get the policy?
You can, but we're so close on getting a policy.
Okay, put it off.
I guess
a month.
Yeah.
But I still need to go through the whole notifying the taxing jurisdictions we're doing this after it gets approved by the agency.
Correct.
One other thing is if we're going to do this virtually again, should we schedule an executive meeting at 8 and then have the regular meeting start at 8:30 so people aren't coming on and
Yes.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Ferris, you were gonna
Is
say
half an hour
something?
gonna be enough, Mike?
I don't know, but I'm just saying, but that way we got a half hour to, if Steve wants to talk to us about anything and we haven't got like all these people waiting, in the bullpen.
Thank you, Shauna. Yeah, I was just wondering, Mark, have you heard anything from the town of Trenton on that other project?
Yeah, we got an email from the supervisor. I gave it to Shauna. They're generally in support of solar projects. They just don't feel they shouldn't be paying any, have no taxes paid or no pilots.
Mark, I thought after the last meeting, you were going to forward that to the whole board, that communication.
I mean, I can send, yeah, I'll forward it out. I forwarded it to Shauna, but we'll get it out then.
And I think that when we get another application, Shauna, if there's anything with it from the town or village or wherever it's located, you should send that out too with the application.
Yep.
Probably as part of the application too, and one of the questions, if you add a page to the application, should be, has the town, city, village that this is in opted out?
Of Section 487.
Mike, I don't know what you had for breakfast this morning, but you are on point today.
What other questions would you want to see in an application?
Well, why don't we get the policy and then you can draft up an application and we'll go over that separate.
Okay.
Okay, if there isn't anything else, we have a motion to adjourn. Somebody? Mary Faith moved it. Did Mike second? Yeah, okay. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Bye, everybody.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.